Welcome back to another week at DroneDJ. This week, we've got several stories for you, starting with New York City's new proposed drone rules. And on the other side of the table, we'll also look at a jury trial for someone flying their Mini 2 near the Dublin Airport. And we also have some potential new drones from Autel with, very interesting names, Alpha and Titan. So let's go back to New York City story first. Kirk, you were very interested in the story, so tell us a little more.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know about kind of like how drone regulations are in New York City, they have a pretty much blanket ban on any aircraft taking off or landing outside of any designated area. So airports, heliports, it has to be pretty much given the okay by the Department of Transportation or the New York Port Authority. And that has always been kind of like the drone industry has always been at odds because it's like a 70-year-old law that like kind of like bans all aircraft from flying. And
So my first question to that was, are they just banning from city property, or are they banning blanket for the entire New York City?
To my understanding of how cities work, it can only be done in city property. If you take off from private property or from like I don't know. This is a weird law because my city has a fairly similar law where it bans any remote controlled vehicle from being operated on city property, from city parks specifically. So I can take off from private property. Now, most of my city is underneath the airspace anyways, so I can't fly pretty much anywhere. But I can take off from private property just fine. This one is pretty much banning aircraft taking off and landing.
This is both for business and recreational. So it doesn't matter if you have Part 107 or not.
Yeah, and so there was a lawsuit by a company that started. I think it's been over a year or so, 2 years ago. Not sure when they started. We actually got reached out this morning by the company that did it because there was they kind of handled it. It wasn't a ruling. It was I think it was handled outside of the court. Where now New York City is going to be offering as Bruce put it in his headline, a slow, pricey, and cumbersome authorization for
permit process.
It pretty much, it's like a 30-day. I think it's like you gotta pretty much get a license every single time I think you fly, and it like takes 30 days to process and costs $150 each time. And,
okay, so if they collect this money, if they collect this money and later on, let's say the federal ruling comes back as they don't have jurisdiction for the airspace and the private properties, then what do they do with the money?
I'm sure that's more lawsuits, or they just would, in the lawsuit, they would have to like give the money back. But like it's kind of like interesting. Like, this is like a kind of a gray area where like they're not banning the flight of aircraft. Like
they're banning the taking off and landing.
Can't fly a drone in New York City. You just can't take off and land from New York City
because they can't ban. They know they don't have authorization for federal airspace.
It's a very well worded law that they're technically not banning flight. They're just banning takeoff.
I guess depending on how like the way it works in Canada is every city has their official plan, and then they zone out the city as different sections, and different types of sections have allowed activities. A lot of that is for building purposes, right? So let's say if a section is allowed for industrial, a section is allowed for residential, etc. But when we talk about ground activities, if I own a property in the city, and let's say my property is zoned for specific activities, then drones are not like taking off and land for a drone. I can allow someone to do that as property owner, not the city at that point. So let's say I wonder, if ruling of that is going to come back similar for New York City. Let's say if I own a business and I have a rooftop patio or I have a nice parking lot, can I allow someone to take off and land from my parking lot or my rooftop? Does city have any authority to ban me from doing that?
Yeah, I think it's all a great question. I think that this
and if they charge, I mean, if I'm a private property owner, and if let's say, a proper process, let's say a film production came in, we go through this for City of Toronto all the time. If it's an actual film production, we go through city permit, film permit, and all of that. So if that comes in and New York City collects the $150, and then the drone pilot ended up flying from a private property, then shouldn't the city share some of that fee with the property owner? Isn't that part of their tax payment?
Yeah, like it there's so much that go into this. Like Geek Vana said, there's a crazy checklist now that goes. So like when you fly a drone normally, like you have like all your checklists for your aircraft and like kind of like your own stuff you've already kind of come up with. Like, do I have the license? Do I have the airspace authorization? Do I have this, and this?
Do I check weather? Do I check
Yeah,
NOTAM?
is the weather good? Like, is the lighting going to be good? Like, who knows? But for this now, you pretty much have to, after you get the permission to fly, you have to also you have to like designate how long it's going to be. You have to designate how long you're going to keep the photos or
You
video.
can't.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't. I mean, just
yeah.
coming
You
from
also have
production, like
to
like
reach
a
out
lot of that
to
gets defined every year. Like if it's a commercial on air, at the end of the year, the agency based on performance decides if they're gonna renew the license or the usage rights or not. Like you can't decide that at the time of your flight.
yeah. You also have to determine like how long you keep storage. To reach out to like local. I can't remember what they're called, but like but from the different, I think from the different boroughs or different like communities that you can be flying over. Um, that like and I'm saying I'm like this, they really don't want to have people flying drones, which I will play a little bit of devil's advocate here for New York City. That is a very big city with a lot of people and a lot of a lot of things can go wrong in New York City with drones. Like I be if you're I
But
mean,
it's a blanket ban realistic? Who's
is
gonna
it
Okay, the other
realistic?
question
No.
is who's gonna
Yeah.
who's gonna enforce it?
Yeah.
Can
And
they enforce it?
that's where like we kind of have to talk about the two-way street, that the cities have to kind of open up the restrictions a little bit, because they're really kind of being a little too restrictive on it, and some of it might not even be illegal. But also, like, I don't know, they have a point. Like, have you ever gone out flying with a bunch of people with drones and they just do stupid things with their drones? Yeah, happens all the time. So like, why would you open up just all drone fights in New York City? Like, that would just be the amount of people that live there between New York City and like the New Jersey area would be absolutely terrible. But like, or maybe we're over exaggerating. Maybe it's not going to be terrible, because who wants to fly in New York City anyways?
Or
Because that
maybe
seems like a
just
terrible
check
idea.
social media to see how many of those viral videos of or viral drone videos or photos of different cities are out there.
Yeah, like I know there's a lot of people who I know who are in New York City and they do fly drones. And I don't know if I don't know exactly how they do it. Like, I don't know if they're flying at in like county parks, if that's what they're doing, or if they're going over there to New Jersey and they fly and they take off from there and fly around the Hudson area, because like a lot of the videos I've seen are like over the Hudson, so that's probably valid. Um,
But I
but
think
it's interesting to
I
see
mean,
what comes of this, because right now that company
we
that's
can
sued
talk
is
about
the only people who can actually.
solutions to say, hey, if you really need to fly there, here are places you can do it. But I think circling back to um, the overall rights is, do they have the rights, and then do citizens in the people who live in New York City pay taxes and have their life there, do they have the right to stand up and say this isn't right? We need to
Mhm.
find, yes, we're concerned about safety and other things about drone flights, but
Yeah.
maybe this is too drastic, it's not the right way.
Yeah, like, I think this needs the thing that kind of bugs me is that this wasn't like a final ruling in the court system, it was handled outside of the court, because I would love to take, this was ruled in a court and the judge said, "No, you have to come up with ways that, like, give people a way to fly drones in your city," because I would love to take that and send it to my city and be like, "Hey, like, New York City just got busted for a similar rule, so, I need, like," I would say you should probably look into your rule. But it has, I think, until this till this gets like a solid ruling by a judge, like we're gonna see, it's gonna be harder and harder to like get cities on board. Like, it's just gonna have to be more and more lawsuits. So
This
hopefully,
is
eventually, this
bringing
like goes up to like a federal court or something like that, and they
Well,
say like,
this is
no, the
bringing the
FAA has.
conflict a little more under the light for
Yeah,
everyone to actually discuss now.
yeah. I mean, it
Ultimately,
is New York City. It's a big city. Like, it's even a ruling outside of the court is still a big deal. It's just like, would be nice if there was like a definitive public, ruling by the court.
ultimately, it's the rights to fly.
Yeah, yeah. Like, who has the right to fly? Yeah, who has the right to fly? Who has the right to regulate it? I think that's been pretty well established in the U.S. code that it's the FAA. But yeah, yeah. So I don't know when it's going to take place. I don't know. It's just
Oh, okay. So what's
freaking
going to
New
happen
York.
to,
It's
let's say,
crazy.
public safety? What's going to happen to New York Police Department or fire? And if they need to use drones for their legit operations, what do they do? Do they have to go
Yeah,
through the same?
yeah. That's a great question. I'm sure a city service is different than a city
Then
citizen.
what if they subcontract?
Yeah, like yeah, if you get a contractor,
What
that's
if
even
city
harder.
planning office? What if city inspection, instead of climbing a roof, they want to send a drone
Yeah.
up?
And we mentioned in our article about like some areas about that. Even of course, like the company that actually did this lawsuit kind of told us like that. This is very much their lawsuit that caused it all, rather than city being concerned for inspections. Um, but having it's just yeah, like drone flights in DC, sorry, not DC, New York is just going to be hard to even do with this, even with these even them opening up in the biggest air quotes I can put on there. Their regulation is still going to be very, very difficult for
And
everyone.
also, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, right? So,
Yeah,
but
none of us are
I can,
lawyers
I,
here.
none of us are lawyers here. But if we can legitimately challenge some of the legal issues from a rule like this, then I'm sure the city's got a team of lawyers and legal specialists who
Hmm.
talked about this before putting out the rule. So I wonder what's going through their heads when they're actually looking at this. Like, did anyone actually raise concerns? Did they think this
Hmm.
was feasible? Like,
Yeah, obviously someone looked at it and be like, well, we got to throw them a bone, so why don't we do this and make it as hard as difficult? So I'm sure that's very similar. So
and did they involve, let's say, local law enforcement to say, hey, we're gonna have the new,
mhm.
bylaw or regulation process. Now you guys have to enforce this. What's their feedback? Did
Yeah,
they say we're happy to enforce it, or did they say not really? I
I'm
mean, we have
sure if
enough
you go to the New York
conflicts on
Police
other
Department,
things, right?
yeah, I'm sure if you go to the New York Police Department, be like, "Hey, we have more stuff for you to enforce." I'm sure they'll be very happy. Like, I don't think they have any other things on their hands that they have to do. Like, I mean, we look at like what does get enforced in the United States, and really the only time you see like anything coming down from like what that are breaking of laws that actually get enforced is when they're flying around prisons or flying around airports or sporting events. But like there's no one like if like I can go out and fly at night right now and no one will know. Like no one will know. I don't need to, if I don't get the authorization, like no one's gonna know. Because there's no FAA
Until they have aeroscope.
official.
Until
Yeah,
they
until they
use
have
aeroscope.
nationwide aeroscope. Yeah, like even then I just go out to the country in Wisconsin, like no one will know.
Or I
Like
guess until remote ID becomes really enforced, then they
and remote
can.
ID, yeah, that's true. Until or remote ID. But like if if you don't have remote ID, like who's gonna enforce you not having a remote ID on your drone?
If they
Enforcement
can't
is
find,
going to be
well, I guess that's
for
more of a that's more of a manufacturer thing. So if
yeah.
DJI puts it on their drone and has it open, don't allow pilots or users to actually shut it down, then you have no
Mhm.
choice.
Enforcement is an issue on all issues in the drone
Can I put the
industry.
tinfoil
So
on the drone on the drone transmitter?
yeah, yeah, put some tinfoil around it. Yeah.
Oh.
So, but
Well,
yeah,
now turning to the other side. So we're talking about, okay, too much restriction and regulation. On the other side, we're seeing
but also,
a actual case about a man being prosecuted or standing on trial for flying his Mini 2. This one is actually very specific, near Dublin Airport. I'm not sure if that title is correct, because this is saying he flew into a critical area of the Dublin
yeah,
Airport. So this is
it.
not just talking about, oh, I flew, a couple of kilometers near the airport. It's saying he actually flew into a critical area.
They also could have also just be referring to a critical area as in within the airspace. Because I don't know, it's the government. Everything's critical to them. But yeah, no, here's one example of overreaching regulation, and here's an example of yeah, maybe we should have some regulation. We don't know exactly what I don't think we know exactly what this person what their intentions were or what they were doing, because I don't know, like he could just have not known. He is flying a Mini 2. He's not flying like a. I mean, you don't
Can
want to
you
like.
play I mean, can you play ignorant when, or can you plead ignorant when you fly a drone into a critical area of an airport? I mean, I don't know what that critical area is, but I think any area in the airport that's defined as critical, probably not a good idea to fly a drone into.
I want to say you shouldn't be able to claim ignorant, but like I don't know. Like some people out there are just like they don't care about the rules, and they don't not that they don't care. It's just like
Then they have to live with
they
the
just don't know
consequences.
that there's rules. So they probably like so this dude. I don't want to say like him flying a Mini 2 means that he's not a knowledgeable individual of the drone industry, because the Mini 2 is a mass market drone. Like it's meant for anyone to buy. So he could have just gotten this for his birthday or gotten this for a gift, and
He
and he
could
just
have flown
took
in the
it and
park.
flew.
He
Yeah,
could have
he
flown in the
lives by the
park.
airport, and he just flew it from his back. He just flew it around. And he didn't really know what the rules were. He just flew it until like
Okay, so this is
he
where it
could.
gets interesting. So if you look at this, he is ordered, right now he's prohibited from going within 2 kilometers of the airport. However, he lived just 2 kilometers from the airport.
Yeah,
And he's also
yeah.
not allowed to, or at a driving distance of 2.5 kilometers. So
It's very interesting that they like banned that, and also so the thing they did, they upped their charges here. I don't know what the original charges were, and I don't remember. It's a long name, unlawful something. Um, so they've upped the charges, and now it's going to a jury trial, over there in Dublin. I feel like they wouldn't. I don't know, like here's a great example of like, yeah, don't be stupid, and we won't get a lot of drone regulations. But also, how do you enforce? How do we police this? Like, how do we as community police and educate people who get drones to not do this? Of course, you always have people who have ill intentions when they buy drones, and you will never be able to stop that. But how do we stop people who don't know how to buy who don't know anything about the drone industry, get a drone for as a gift, and do stupid things? Like, is there some? Does DJI need to start? Do manufacturers need to start putting in stuff into their? Yeah, ignorance is not an excuse. You're right. That's true. Like, ignorance is not an excuse. But how can we like stop ignorance from being claimed as an excuse? Like, how do we give them every single way? Because when you buy a new drone, like, there's really not, unless you're reading every single pamphlet, I don't think
let's
there's
face
really
it, not
anything in there
everyone
that.
is responsible. So to give you
Yeah.
another case, something I'd really like to see some effort from communities is we've seen young early teenagers got drones, and expensive drones. We're looking at Mini 2, Mini 3.
Mm-hmm.
They're not cheap as a toy, right? Their parents
No.
bought them, the parents weren't there, and the kids were just flying them, buzzing them around. Small kids, we're talking about their infants, their 2-3 year olds at community parks.
Yeah.
And that's a serious safety issue to me,
Yeah.
right? If parents are being irresponsible, and what happens in that situation.
And it's like, it's one of those things, like in the United States, you have to take your, if you get a drone, you want to fly a drone, even recreational, you have to do that trust course. And theoretically, you have to print it off, put it, and carry around you and show it to anyone who asks for it.
Or
But
can DJI actually incorporate more fly zones that has to pop out, like say age requirement that
yeah,
it has to
that's
pop out
yeah,
around
like theoretically,
not just airports, but maybe some other critical infrastructures, maybe some other park space like school. I don't think people should fly their drones into school area unless they're authorized.
yeah, like a better way of adding, that, and that's something we can bring up with like uh Aloft this week announced that they're going to have APIs available for their um by the way, I've been calling it LANC this entire time. Lance apparently is the proper pronunciation of it. I didn't know that. But Aloft is adding open up APIs for their Lance and airspace kind of like offerings. And so maybe that's the holdup for like DJI being able to do something. I mean, DJI can grab, the airspace and put in a firmware update. And and they're there. Like it'll show you, like, whenever I turn on my drone in my house, because I live in airspace, controlled airspace, it'll warn you not to take off. But I can override that pretty quickly. Like it's not difficult. I haven't
But I
I
wonder,
haven't done
can
it,
they
but
put like a age restriction by or a time restriction? So maybe when school is on, right? When kids are going about, maybe don't allow people to fly into that space.
can
I
also,
learned
how do
something.
you
Okay,
gather information on every single
if
school?
someone's from New York, let me know if this is right. I learned about this last week. Again, I'm not sure if I haven't confirmed this. So in New York, is it if you're going to like a specific community park, if you're adult, like more than 12 or something, if you're not accompanied by a kid, you can't go and use the park facilities, or you'll get fined. So that's something I learned last week. Again, I'm not sure
Interesting.
if anyone's from New York, let me know. But that piece of rule makes perfect sense to me, right? Maybe something like that for people flying drones into, school space, like community park space. There should be something around that.
All right, like I don't know. It's also, oh my god, there's so much common sense that as someone who it just doesn't make sense that they don't follow the common sense of flying a drone, and it's just hard to even come up with theories on how to fix the problem when it's
We
such
don't
an
have a
easy
solution.
solution. Like
I don't think anyone has a solution at this point, but I also feel like there are enough smart people out there to work on the solution.
it's like I feel like right now I feel like designing a UI back when I was in college. I was a software engineer, and some person just picked up the phone, picked up my my UI thing, and I spent like hours on it to like make it as easy to use, and they break it within like 3 seconds. It's like, why do you do stupid things? Like, stop doing stupid things. It's not meant for just stop it. But it's like, yeah, it's like you're upset, and it's just like there's nothing you can do about it, so you just have to go back and find a better way of like making it less breakable to stupid people. And there's so many things that we can do. How many of them are ethical? How many of them are actually possible of doing? Like, I think the school idea is interesting.
Rules, regulations are supposed to establish the minimum, right? Ethics, flying or operating ethically, that's an entirely different story at that point.
How do like flying? Okay, so like flying at talk about the flying low at kids in a park. Flying at 25 feet above the ground is not bad. Like, you fly 25 feet above the ground all the time if you want to get a cool shot of it, across the ground. Now, but that's a scenario, like, how do you block that certain scenario from happening? Because 25 feet above the ground is very close to humans. Is that like another?
And
Do we have to add in another
I would also
authorization?
question, what are they doing with the footage? I mean, if they're just capturing, nice scenery, trees, and spaces, that's fine. But if they're capturing clearly people's faces in there, minors or adults, doesn't matter. If they're clearly capturing people's faces in there, what are they doing with the footage? Do they even have rights to use the footage?
Do they? I mean, here in the United States, they would, like, legal. Like, it's out if you're out in public space, then you would. That's controversial in its own way for people who don't want to get captured. But
I mean, if it's a
it
dog,
is what it is. Like,
sure,
that's
but I don't think that's right for minors.
no, like, there's so much. There's so many things that when you go into like the ethical side of flying drones, like that.
There's what's called a
It's just so
reasonable
hard to regulate.
expectation. So if you go to a large, so if you don't put up like privacy fence and things, if you go to a public space, there's a reasonable expectation of your images potentially being captured. But I think if someone's monetizing using that image or using it for other reasons, that's a different story.
Yeah. And we can go. This is a rabbit hole that we can go down. So
this is the week where we open up slightly the can of worms.
This is the can of worms episode.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna continue, at different times when we see interesting stories or things happening. Again, it's not something we can resolve, but I hope there's enough smart people out there looking at this and coming up with solutions.
The solutions are out there. Just don't be stupid, guys. That's all you gotta do.
Well, then you're going against human nature.
No, that's adventure. Be adventurous. Don't be stupid.
The last story we have is Autel Robotics to reveal new drones as Alpha and Titan. As I mentioned, those are very creative names. I mean, as far as names go, right?
Yeah, like, I mean, Autel's got some. Hey, they're trying hard on their naming system. It's everything Evo as well. Is it still like is Autel Evo, Titan, Evo, Alpha, as well? I think it's possibly the Alpha got
maybe they should just partner with DC Comics or for any of the comic characters out there.
Just name them all after comic book heroes.
Yeah.
So they released the Alpha, which is a pretty much like a bigger version of the Max, which is kind of like a competitor to the DJI
M30. Are they going for cargo from the look of it? Are they going
Titan
for
is the cargo one, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, Titan is the cargo one, which is interesting. That one's kind of interesting to see because that's kind of competing in a space that DJI really isn't competing that much. I mean, you could theoretically, do cargo with the M300, but like you wouldn't. It's not really meant for it. Yeah, it's not really meant for it. You could, force it to do whatever you want, but Yeah, it's kind of an interesting space. But the alpha is pretty much a direct attack
I
or
didn't
direct
see a
like
picture of
competition between
Alpha
DJI
actually.
M30 and itself.
Yeah, I didn't
And
really see.
but yeah, they released the Max 4T, the Max 4N. That's thermal and night vision. That was like a few. I know they released the Max around Max 4T was around yeah, Autel Ironman, love it. The Max 4T was around CES time this year. I think the 4N was like a few months after that, and it was just the same drones. They're a little bit smaller than the M30. They're bigger than the Mavic 3 and of course the Autel Evo 2. Like they're kind of like in that weird like middle range, and the Alpha is pretty much like a M30. And it to my knowledge, it pretty much has very similar features to the Max. So the interesting about Autel for me when it comes to the Alpha is that they have an ability to switch manufacturing over to the United States if they really, really want to. Autel Automotive
How much
already
is
does.
it going to cost per drone then?
It's going to cost a lot, but if they want to open up a small factory I think they're in Ohio, I think is what Autel Automotive is. They're in the Midwest somewhere. Because they already manufacture stuff here there.
I
So
know. Can
and
I just
Autel
say, if I
Robotics
just
is
say the
really
one thing I'm just not getting for Autel is Autel, what are you trying to be?
yeah
You have a
everything.
huge mothership in China that's automotive, right? That
Mhm,
manufactures, a huge amount of, like, we're talking about, multi-billion-dollar company at least for their mothership. So it's
mhm.
just I don't know, it confuses me on what are they actually trying to do with their drone space.
Yeah, and they're
They
trying
can't just call
when
themselves
I've
not
talked with
Chinese by, I mean, if they just move a manufacturer or one of their smaller manufacturer facilities in states, they can't just think they're US company at that point.
yeah, like they're still a Chinese company, but at least I don't know, like it's one of those I mean, I think they could honestly easily make a switch to just be a US company. Like I think they really could. They already have
But the perception won't be. The perception will never be.
they'll still be the difference is that Altel really hasn't been funded that much by the government as much, I mean, compared to DJI. So I think DJI is the when we're talking about these DJI bans, like it's all political. Like everything's politics. Like there's not when these bans
So
come up,
is
there's not like
right.
a
Then
list
goes
of
back
evidence.
to,
It's just fear mongering in the name.
Is Autel doing this just to get away from the ban, which that's not the right reason. I
Yeah,
mean, any company branding and marketing should be based, like, they have to find who, it's almost like a person, you have to find who you are first. And
yeah.
I hate to see this because, I'm an
I
immigrant. I thought
between my
North America it's a, it's an immigrant culture, right? You should be
yeah.
proud of your heritage, you should be proud of who you are, but that shouldn't stop you from embracing the culture here in the market here. But don't try to pretend that you're not.
Yeah. I speaking with Max, their CEO, last 2 years at CES every time. I mean, they're really trying to be that company that like just keeps pushing the drone industry forward with like new things. I would love for them to kind of like simplify their like offerings down to just
Be
focus
more
on like
focused. Yeah.
but like yeah, of course the money is in the enterprise world. Like I'm sure that delivery drone because drone delivery is going to be huge. I'm sure them producing a delivery drone, which is called the Titan, could be really like could be really lucrative for them. And of course, if they could build a good enough
Well,
enterprise drone that competes with DJI, that
I
could be really
think
lucrative for them.
delivery is a separate topic we've discussed several
Yeah,
times. As equipment, I'm sure as a manufacturer they can produce quality equipment, but as a feasible and viable business, I
yeah,
don't know. Personally, to me, I still don't know if urban, drone delivery at this point
I,
is a feasible or profitable
yeah. When
business
we're looking
model.
at like if we're talking about like Uber Eats of drones, that's a really far. I think that's super far off. We're talking about like transportation between hospitals for like organs or like
Then how can you scale
medical
up from there?
equipment or like
That's not
there's
a
yeah
scalable business, really.
it could, yeah. I think there's a lot of areas outside of like, of course, the consumer side of things when it comes to drone delivery. But I would love Autel to get back to where I was at. Like, I love Autel to like kind of just like focus in on like, here's our really awesome like consumer drone, and here's our really awesome enterprise drone. Here's our awesome Dragonfish, like professional series
It's spread
enterprise
a bit
drone.
too thin right now.
They seem to be really spread out, and with that, what we've had, the Autel and Nano, the Light and Nano came out beginning of last year. It's been a year and a half, and I mean they've had They're still great drones. They've had some good firmware updates, but like, no rumors are coming out about whether or not they're coming out with like a second version of those. We're still on the Evo 2 for years. They've been coming out with like kind of like small upgrades to around the Evo 2 V3 now. Like just no Evo 3. So it's just they seem like they just seem a little spread out between all those different companies. But Maxwell seems very, very confident in his company. So hey, I mean that's his job.
I mean, as
But
far
like,
as
hey,
the
if
CEO
he
goes,
thinks
you
he's doing the
better
right
be
thing,
confident.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is like kind of like a blank check coming from Autel Automotive to like just keep operating. I don't know what their financials are, but like eventually they got to start making. I mean, they just keep doing it, and they just keep. I mean, obviously it's working somewhere. Something's working. I think the Dragonfish is really, really cool. Anyways, Dragonfish is super cool. They could totally. I feel like the delivery drone is a stretch, but I can see how it could be lucrative, especially in China, because I think China wants to be really open with like all the new technology, even if it fails, they still want to have it. But I can the enterprise stuff, unless they're moving their company over to the United States, I think their Max and Alpha stuff isn't really going to take off, because right now it's the United States who's banning a lot of Chinese drones. If the Chinese fear kind of continues on into Europe, I mean that's a whole other continent gone. If they start banning Chinese drones, um, I feel like
My
competing against
question
DJI.
is that ban successful? I mean, besides just defense and some federal government departments, is the ban successful even from local law enforcement from buying Chinese drones?
It's been successful in Florida, so for at least government use. And we're talking about enterprise government use. Like that's really where these enterprise drones are going to really. They seem to also be pushing mapping on that, so private companies could use it, and so that's going to be successful still. They can still compete with DJI on that. But we're talking about trying to get I'll tell drone at every single police department, every single sheriff's department, the FBI, whatever it is. They really can't be competing against DJI when you're already facing just blanket bans from the government, on your products just because you're made in China. Like that's really, really hard. That's like gonna be a really, really hard uphill battle to beat. But hey, it could still be lucrative for the private industry, which he has yet to see any bans, at least. So
Now, what happens if you don't have competitive products? Let's say if you're law enforcement and your counterparts, the criminals, are using, obviously they're not bound by federal government or state government rules on what manufacturer they can or cannot buy.
mm-hmm.
So what happens if you're using technologies that are, about a step
Inferior to
behind?
DJI.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the issue with the ban. That's the whole thing with the Florida ban, is that all the local law enforcement are like upset because they use inferior drones now. Like I don't know what drones they're using. It should
And
be
what
funny.
happened to free
I would
market?
love for them to name drop their drones like so bad. Like I would love for them to just come out and be like Skydio or Parrot or whatever drones they could be using are just terrible. Because that would just make for great headlines. But uh, I'd be interested to see interested to know what drones they do use. But yeah, they all complain that the U.S. made drones are inferior to the Chinese made ones. And I've heard that Autel's Max is like a solid drone. Like it's not like a toy drone. Like it works. Like it does pretty
But
good.
if they're in it for a long run, they've got to realize building a working product is different from building a successful company, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think if they're really interested in the long run, I feel like they would have to move to the United States. I feel like that has to be a thing. Like there's no way around it. If they really,
Or
if the drone bans
at what
continue,
point does the mother company say, okay,
someone,
we've put
yeah,
enough money in you for R&D, and let's face it, it is the family, right?
yeah.
Maxwell is the family of Autel Automotive, which is the bigger parent company. At what point they say, you've had your fun, come back and take over the main business.
Yeah, I don't know if that will ever happen. Just mostly because I think they still they make good products. They think they make some solid products. I think they do sell.
Are they
Uh,
profitable?
we don't know. Like it's a Chinese company. We'll never know. Like we don't know if DJI is profitable. Like they could. It's interesting. Like tech companies historically,
Yeah, if you're not public,
if
or
you're not
if you don't
public,
release
who
any
knows? What
information, you
you
don't
could
have
just be
to.
raising capital continuously. And we'll just never know. But I'm sure DJI is profitable. I'm sure I'm sure Autel is doing fine. Like they seem to be a solid company that has continued on for a while. There's no signs of any like hardships. Like they keep releasing new drones, but they've really amped up in the past year. So who knows what's going on inside that brain of Maxwell over there. Um, I think one of the two things are going to like win out. Either the bans are going to win, and eventually all these companies are going to have to move to outside of China and outside of that sphere of toxicity, I guess you can call it. Anywhere far away from them, it's like China, Russia, anything really in Asia, and just have to move over to North America, Europe, whatever. Or these bans are going to start going in place more. They're going to start getting challenged, and they're going to win, and the bans are going to lose out, and like the company's going to win, and so we just don't have to worry about this anymore.
We'll see
Those
what
are one of the two
happens.
things. One's gonna have to beat each other out.
I'd like to see a clearer definition of what would be considered, a Chinese product or company, or a US product or company. Because, some of that in Canada, if you want to qualify for, let's say Canadian made products, qualify for government grants or different
Mm-hmm.
collaborations, they look at the value of the product and the core, technologies of the product. So you can have majority of the product manufactured in China, in Indonesia, in any of the other countries. But let's say if your product costs $100 and $20 is manufacturing, and $80 is your R&D, is your technologies, is your other sensors and things that are developed in, let's say, either US or Canada, then it's still defined as a North American product. So I'd like to see a little more clear definition on just what makes it a specific country's product or company.
And I think a precursor to whatever happens with TGI is going to be TikTok. Because the concern was the data. A lot of the concern is just the data. And so they've moved data centers over to the United States.
Can I just say, I just don't,
Still
I
not
don't use TikTok in general. Am I
I've
that behind?
I'm trying not to. I'm actually trying to do like a no social media thing for like a week and see if it works. That's what I'm doing this week, so we'll see how it happens. But whatever happens with TikTok, how these bans go in place, if you can ban a company for just being Chinese, like that's gonna.
Well,
If you
can I
look at the
just say
DJI ban and the TikTok ban, they're
TikTok doesn't matter if it's Chinese or not. Can I just
yeah.
say I believe banning TikTok in general, especially
the
for kids, is
productivity
not a bad thing.
for the increased productivity of humanity worldwide, can we just ban all short form content? But like whatever happens with the TikTok ban, because the ban between DJI and TikTok are pretty much exactly the same issues. They're both concerned about data being seen by the Chinese Communist Party. So if TikTok is successfully banned, there's no reason why DJI could be successfully banned.
Oh, on that note, wasn't there a release from Amazon this week about what's the camera that Amazon uses? The name hit me.
Talking about like just their cameras on their products.
Yeah, and there's a privacy leak this week. Amazon released, or not Amazon released, someone released about Amazon's employees actually have access. They can actually watch live stream from the cameras, from their cameras that are used as
And
security.
here's the reason why banning Chinese products doesn't make sense, because US companies are just as bad. So that is it. That's all I can say on that right there, is that US companies are just as bad. So
regardless, data security is a bigger concern. Doesn't matter which country, would like to see better data security for
always.
Yeah. On that note, that's everything we got for you this week, and we'll see you back here next Friday.